The siege at Thorn High drops you into a city that suddenly becomes unhinged and a school that turns into a trap, and it wastes no time making you feel the panic. The movie follows Edwin, a quiet substitute teacher with a single, desperate mission: find the nephew he believes was taken from his family years earlier. Edwin's search brings him to Thorn High, a juvenile detention style school full of angry, damaged kids, and at first he struggles to connect. The early scenes set up the tone: classrooms full of sarcasm, teachers burned out, and a social atmosphere where suspicion and racial tension can flare at any moment. Edwin's calm, slightly world, wary presence stands apart at first, and the movie uses that contrast to make the coming violence feel even more shocking. As Edwin starts to navigate the school, the audience gradually meets the students who will become the story's antagonists and victims. They're reckless and aggressive, but the film also shows them as products of systemic failure, neglected homes, gangs, and a culture that normalizes cruelty. Edwin's empathy is what drives the plot. He's not a hero in any flashy sense. He's a man trying to repair a family ruptured long ago. When he finally recognizes the boy he's been searching for among the students, that quiet, personal victory is immediately ripped away by news of a citywide riot. The riot isn't random background noise. It's an eruption of anti-Chinese sentiment and social unrest that spreads fast. Shops burn, mobs form, and panic sweeps the streets. Transport stops, phones lose signal, and the city's safety nets collapse. That sudden shift from a contained drama to full-scale societal breakdown is the film's core jolt. Once the riot reaches the streets around Thorn High, the school becomes an island under siege. The administrators decide to keep students there for safety, but the building isn't safe because the riot brings opportunistic violence as well as organized cruelty. A local gang of older students, led by the brutal Jefri, exploits the chaos and targets the Chinese students and anyone who defends them. The film handles this with blunt, uncomfortable scenes to see harassment, racial threats, and escalating physical brutality. Edwin, who came to teach and to find family, is now forced into an impossible role: protector, negotiator, and hostage. That role reversal is the movie's moral engine. Edwin doesn't have to be violent to be courageous. He just has to be steady and willing to put himself between the children and the mob. The siege sequences are relentless and claustrophobic. The gang's tactics shift between intimidation, staged negotiations, and terrifying displays of power to make a point. They want to humiliate and control, and at times they threaten to burn the school with hostages inside. The film uses the locked doors, cut phone signals, and the echo of chants outside to create a pressure cooker. Inside, the dynamic among the students changes. Some harden into survival mode, some panic, and a few show unexpected humanity. Edwin tries to negotiate by using reason and a kind of moral leverage. He reminds the gang that killing or burning people will draw more police attention and won't shield them from consequences. That kind of talk barely phases Jefri and his followers, but it does buy time and force the gang to make risky decisions that reveal cracks in their loyalty. One of the film's most painful threads is how old wounds resurface during the siege. The movie reveals Edwin's backstory in small, emotionally heavy beats. His sister was a victim years earlier. She searched for her child, and she died without finding him. Edwin's personal quest to find a nephew is not just a plot device, it's his way of repairing a family history scarred by violence and shame. When Edwin realizes that one of the boys in his class might be the missing nephew, the stakes shift from abstract to deeply personal. That reunion, however fragile, humanizes both characters, T, the nephew, who is understandably brittle and suspicious, and Edwin, who is willing to risk everything to keep him alive. Their bond never becomes saccharine. It remains raw and realistic, which makes the film's darker beats hit harder. The siege brings out conflicting impulses in the student population. Some are complicit in the violence because they've learned to bully for status. Others are terrified and willing to help. The film shows how easy it is for peer pressure and bravado to tip into atrocity. One of the gang members confesses or is revealed to have committed murder in the past, which only accelerates the group's descent into more extreme plans. The mob mentality fuels escalation. Threats turn into physical torture, and opportunistic cruelty becomes permanent harm. The school becomes a microcosm of the city's collapse, where lawlessness spreads and moral lines blur under pressure. Despite that bleak setup, Edwin's approach is to find humanity in the chaos. He keeps talking, bargaining, and small moment consoling that keep survivors focused. The movie stages tense sequences where students try to open locked exits, work out escape plans, and hide from the gang while the rioters press the perimeter. There's a psychological edge here. The siege isn't only about physical barriers, but also about fear, shame, and the choices that can either save or doom you. The film does not shy away from showing the cost. There are casualties, moral compromises, and moments where people have to accept that not everyone will walk away. The ending is the film's reckoning. Without giving away every beat, the finale brings the siege to a climax with a mixture of improvisation, sacrifice, and outside intervention. Edwin's steady presence becomes a focal point for escape. He coordinates small diversions and convinces certain frightened students to take the risky path out. The film makes clear that not every plan works perfectly. Some leaders among the gang turn on their fellows, loyalties break down, and violence spirals beyond anyone's control. At the same time, lesser characters step up in unexpected ways, which the movie uses to underscore a simple moral dollar. Ordinary courage is often quiet and messy rather than cinematic and clean. As the siege resolves, reinforcements finally arrive. The police presence grows because the riot has stretched local resources and become a national story, and those forces start to clear the streets and stabilize some parts of the city. The arrival of official help is not a deus ex machina. It comes at the cost of lost time and suffering, and the film keeps the rescue imperfect and ambiguous. Some perpetrators are apprehended, some survivors are safely evacuated, and some losses are permanent. Edwin's reunion with his nephew ends up being both healing and tragic. The boy is found, but the cost of survival changes him. The movie avoids a neat happy ending and instead gives a realistic, emotionally honest resolution that acknowledges trauma while allowing for a fragile hope. Beyond the plot, the film is a social critique. It uses the riot and the school siege to explore how xenophobia and economic tension can be weaponized quickly, and how young people can be radicalized into cruelty when community structures fail. The movie doesn't excuse the students' actions, but it pushes viewers to consider how cycles of violence and marginalization feed into tragic choices. Thorn is shown as an institution that tries to manage young people after society has already failed them. The film repeatedly points out that punitive systems without support produce more harm than good. Edwin, as an outsider who is nevertheless tied to the injured community by family, becomes a moral litmus test. He asks, what does it mean to be responsible for others when the state and social norms break down? Technically, the film favors unadorned intensity over stylized action. The siege scenes use handheld camera work, close framing, and a muted color palette to convey both urgency and claustrophobia. There's little in the way of flashy heroics. Instead, the camera stays close to faces, showing fear and determination in small gestures. The sound design amplifies the chaos outside. Distant explosions, chanting crowds, and breaking glass, while the interior scenes are often muted and focused on breath and whispered plans. That approach makes the film feel immediate and human, and it keeps the audience emotionally invested in characters who could otherwise be reduced to stereotypes. The movie also raises uncomfortable questions about justice and accountability. Some characters demand violent retribution in the moment, while Edwin advocates for preserving lives and letting the legal system take care of wrongs when possible. The film doesn't provide easy answers, but it implies that preserving a culture of life, even when enraged, produces more possibilities for future healing. That ethical tension is where the movie earns its emotional weight in the end. Survival alone is not the point. The quality and consequences of choices under pressure matter deeply. For viewers, the biggest takeaway is how fragile safety really is, and how easily a city can tilt into chaos when prejudice and lawlessness cascade together. The siege at Thorn High makes that take clear by putting ordinary people, a substitute teacher, scared kids, exhausted staff, at the center of a catastrophic event. The ending doesn't erase the damage, but it suggests that small acts of care and moral steadiness can shape a path forward. Edwin doesn't return the world to how it was, but his actions help create a space where people can begin to reckon with trauma and perhaps rebuild trust. If you watch the film, expect to feel uncomfortable in all the right ways. It's not a popcorn action movie. It's a tough, humane thriller that asks questions about identity, responsibility, and survival under siege. The characters are flawed, and the ending is realistic rather than neatly redemptive. But the story ultimately honors quiet courage and the idea that protecting the vulnerable matters, even when the world is falling apart.